Hello fellow YouTubers, Bear Prepper here. Today we're going to make mix for vanilla pudding, chocolate pudding, and caramel pudding. I'm using Grandma's Inflation Fighters Volume 2. So let's go ahead and get started. It's really easy to make, and what you want to make first is you want to make your mix for your vanilla pudding. For each batch of pudding mix, and I'm making 3 batches here today, I'm going to use 2.5 cups of instant non-fat dry milk. I'm using Great Value, generic, anything will work. To that you're going to add 1.5 cups of sugar. And I'm making 3 batches, so this is 1.5 cups. I'm going to add 3 of those. And you should use a dry measure for dry and a wet measure for wet. But as long as you keep it consistent, and I'm using my wet measure for all my dry stuff, your recipe will come out the same. Okay, next you're going to add 3/4 of a cup of cornstarch for each batch. So this is my last 3/4 cup. And now we're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt, and I will put the recipes below. These little teaspoon thingies are cute. They work really good. You just flip them, and it's got all of them on one. So, teaspoon. Now you can reduce the salt if you like, but it really enhances the flavor. And you know, it's only 3 teaspoons for this, for 3 batches. So that's not that much. So now we're just going to mix it together. And you want to mix it really good, because you know the cornstarch is a different density than the milk. And just so you know, I always make a mess. I do. I am a messy cook. So once you have it all mixed together, you have your vanilla pudding. Well, I'm going to make 2 batches of the chocolate and 2 batches of the caramel. So I need 1.5 cups of cocoa. 3/4 of a cup is 1 batch. Alright, so I have 1.5 cups of cocoa. And we need 1/4 cup of sugar for each batch. So I need 1/2 cup of sugar. Now I'm going to do the caramel pudding. For the caramel pudding, you can use 1.5 cups of packed brown sugar, or 1.5 cups of sugar. Well, let me get my 3 cups of sugar, because I'm making 2 batches. And we're going to add molasses. Now, like I always do, before I use my molasses, I pour a little bit of oil in my measuring spoon or cup or whatever it is. You don't have to move it around, but you can. And it's going to be 1 tablespoon to 1 cup. So if I have 3 cups, I'm going to use 3 tablespoons. It doesn't have to be exact. And can you see that? Came right out. So now we're going to take our whisk, and we're going to whisk up our chocolate mix. And we're going to whisk up, well, we're not going to whisk up. we're going to take a fork and we're going to mix up our caramel mix. You can also save your molasses out and just know that you need to add sugar. But I'm going to make some, and this should store really well. It's just brown sugar. If you're just making one serving, you don't need to go through this trouble. But I'm going to jar it up and say add this much for chocolate pudding, add this much for caramel pudding, and how much for a batch of pudding with the vanilla mix. Okay, so I have all the molasses mixed in with the sugar, and this is just going to be one batch for the caramel. And to that, you're going to add the same ingredients, 3/4 cup of cornstarch, and 1.5 cups of powdered milk. And 1 teaspoon of salt. And we're going to mix that up. If you didn't realize it, this is cook pudding. It's not instant pudding. So we have our vanilla pudding mix. Let me move the caramel out of the way. And what we need to do now is we're going to make the vanilla and show you how to do that, but I'm going to add the chocolate to it. So I'm not going to make a batch of vanilla and a batch of chocolate. So the first thing we need to do is we need 1.25 cups of pudding mix. And I have a double boiler going here. It's boiling underneath. Whatever you do, don't let the water touch the bottom of your double boiler. And so I need 1/4 cup of the mix. Then I need 2.5 cups of water. We need 1/3 teaspoon or a splash of vanilla. And we're going to mix that until thickened, stirring constantly. So at this point with the vanilla, you would just cook it, stirring constantly until it starts to thicken. And then cover for 5 minutes, add your tablespoon of butter, and then remove half of it from the heat and beat in your egg at that point in time if you're doing raw eggs. Then you cook it over 1 more minute over the heat and chill. But since we're doing chocolate, at this point is where you would add your chocolate. Now if you're using raw egg, you will add it at the end. You're just going to use a beaten egg. But if you're using dehydrated egg like I am, you can add it into your pudding mix without making a mess. Good luck with that one. Get it in there really good. For the chocolate, you need about 1/4 cup of your cocoa mix. So I'm going to add 1/4 cup, maybe a little rounded, because I love chocolate. You're just going to add that directly too, so now it becomes chocolate pudding. And you're going to mix that in really well. and let it continue to cook. Once it's starting to thicken, you want to go ahead and stop stirring and cover it for 5 minutes. Alright, once your timer goes off, you want to take a tablespoon of fat. And that's exactly what the recipe says, a tablespoon of fat. I'm going to use a tablespoon of butter. I'm just going to mix it in. Ooh, it's nice and thick now. You could also add your vanilla again at this point. I just always add it early, because I always forget if I wait. And we have chocolate pudding. That was really easy. So let me dish these up and then we'll make the caramel pudding. So let's make the caramel pudding. For the caramel pudding, we're going to use the same measurements as we did for the white pudding. If I could turn my little recipe thing around, 1 1/4 cups of caramel sauce or caramel powder, and then 2 1/2 cups of water, one tablespoon of egg, a little vanilla, mix it up, and stir until it starts to thicken. Be prepared, the caramel takes a little longer to even start to thicken, so just keep stirring it. I actually sat down and just reached over and stirred it. But once it starts to thicken, you want to do just like you did with the chocolate or the vanilla. You want to take your lid and cover it and set your timer for 5 minutes. Okay, once your timer goes off, you want to put in a tablespoon of fat. I'm using butter. And you want to mix it in. Alright, so we got it done. We have our chocolate pudding and our caramel pudding. And I was able to make 4 of those and still have chocolate and caramel. Whoop. There, can you see that now? It's one of those little Ziploc, small square ones. Chocolate and caramel. So that's a lot of pudding it made. But while I was making the recipe, I realized that one batch, this is 3, minus what I made, all you need to do is add 4 tablespoons of dehydrated egg to it, and you can already have it mixed up. Then with your vanilla, you can simply mix up your chocolate mix and the recipe will be below. You don't need to mix up a separate caramel mix. You can just simply measure it out, and when you've got it, putting it in the pot, add a tablespoon of molasses and a tablespoon of sugar extra. And then the only ingredient that's not in your mix is vanilla and some sort of fat. I used butter, but you can use whatever you like. So I would say that would be the way to go. Mix your vanilla batch up, mix your chocolate up, and just have written on the side that you need 1 tablespoon of molasses and 1 tablespoon of sugar per recipe to make caramel. And there we go. We have pudding for food storage. And it really tastes good. So I'm going to let these cool, and we'll come back and give it a taste test. Alright, it's taste test time. Thickened up really nice. Oh, that caramel is wonderful. Let's get some chocolate. Oh, chocolate. Yum, yum. You know what I need to do? I think I'm going to add peanut butter to that chocolate. And make it Reese's with caramel topping. It's still warm. I couldn't wait any longer. Isn't it purty? Gotta give this a try, folks. Blessings.